What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only show that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin and is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. And that is One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're choosing to listen to this show on. I am your host, Anthony. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, doing a bit of a mailbag, not a bit of a mailbag, all a bit of a mailbag. That's going to include a lot of live engagement for those tuning in. I'm going to go through everything in just a minute here, but I thought it was with just what we've seen, the direction of this team, some of the changing of the guard from a roster standpoint, some of the draft picks that have been made, the signing of Marquez Valdes-Scantling today, just a lot of the things that have been happening. I love to make this show very engagement driven and incorporate the live viewers in the chat as much as possible. And I've talked about doing this kind of episode really for this entire offseason with how jumping the chat usually is. So I thought I put an idea out on the Twitter, put a tweet out, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything that is on your mind as a Bills fan and watcher and lover of this team. Throw it at me, whatever you got, whether responding to this tweet or sending me DMs. So I had a bunch of DMs come my way and some responses to the tweet. So got some pieces and some questions and comments and thoughts that I'm going to put into the show that I'll be pulling from Twitter that, again, got sent my way either in some episode threads or that were DMs sent to me directly. And then for those watching and joining me live here on this episode, this is something I'm going to be saying consistently throughout the episode, just in case we get people that are trickling in as the episode goes forward. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything that is on your mind regarding the Buffalo Bills, put it up into the live chat if you are willing and able to. This episode is purely driven by you folks. So again, the stuff I got on Twitter that got sent my way via threads and DMs and everything from the live chat tonight. I'm going to go until there's really nothing to go with anymore, which means if I run out of stuff from Twitter that got sent my way, if nobody has anything from the live chat and we're done in 25 minutes, we're done in 25 minutes. If it goes past that, it goes past that. This was a fun exercise to see, especially with the stuff that got DM to me. It was cool to see where a lot of fans' heads are at, what their focus is, how many of them share the same worries, how many of them have similar areas of focus, but different viewpoints and thoughts about where that focus will lead, either positively or negatively. So I'm very excited to do this episode. And thank you to everybody who sent me stuff, again, either in the threads or the DMs. Thank you very much to everybody who's joining me live on this show. And again, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and everything you got, throw it up into the chat. We're going to go through and roll through a bunch of it in this episode. And I'm going to start with what we got here in the chat, just because I figured I can wean through this a little bit as we start to go forward. So I'm going to change the banner. It says Buffalo Bills roster mailbag, because that's what the focus of this episode is. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, likes, dislikes, worries, fears, frustrations, deep, dark secrets, whatever you got regarding the Buffalo Bills roster. That's what I asked for some, stuff about to be sent to me, and it was. And then again, for those of you in the chat, start rolling through and we'll go from there. I'm going to start with this one from JG, who says, is there a chance this pass catching group actually outperforms last year's group? What's the likelihood? I think it depends on what you define as outperforming last year's group. If it's just purely from a raw stats standpoint, or if you're talking about like schematically and just how much the offense flows week to week and the stats you see week to week. And I think that's obviously going to change kind of how you view that. But if we're looking at it from a numbers perspective, so regular season and playoffs, I'm combining both. The pass catching group, and that's everybody. So wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, anybody and everybody who caught a pass last year, 603 targets, 432 catches, 4,696 yards, and 33 touchdowns. All things considered, pretty decent year. Based on, how you kind of define thresholds and different tiers and levels and things like that. I really do think it's going to be tough. Again, if we're talking about statistically and even schematically, I do think it's going to be tough for this pass catching group to outperform last year's group just because of the absence of Stefon Diggs. I don't want to keep beating this drum too much. I've said it on Twitter. I said it earlier tonight on Joe's show. I said it on the show I did at 5 o'clock with Taylor Kyles of CLNS, who covers the Pats and does great stuff over there. I don't think Stefon Diggs is washed. I know he had that drop against the Chiefs in the playoffs, but people using that drop to kind of say that he's done and washed and over, or using the stats down the stretch to say that he's done or washed or over, I just don't agree with that. If you watch the tape, he's beaten L'Jarius Sneed. He's beaten Jalen Ramsey. He's getting open. Even earlier in the year, he's getting open downfield, and Allen's just missing him left and right, which bothers me even more that people really want to drag him for that drop against Kansas City, which was a big drop, and he should have caught that ball. But people aren't dragging Allen for missing him like 7 or 8 times for the rest of the season every time he was open deep, either underthrowing him or overthrowing him. So I do think the absence of Stefon Diggs will be felt. I don't think this pass catching group is doomed. I don't think they're terrible, but I think overall, when you look at it, I mean, there's a good chance that this pass catching group isn't really feared by other teams and is looked down upon by other teams or even other fan bases. And when I say pass catching group, I'm including Dalton Kincaid, who I think is the number one for this group and should be the number one. So there is a chance. I'm never going to sit here and say like, nope, absolutely won't happen. Like, who knows? Maybe this leads to an offensive renaissance and it is more pass focused, or the run game succeeds and it opens things up offensively to the point that this Bills offense just explodes and is insane and they beat all of these numbers. I do think it's going to be tough. Granted, you have a year 2 Dalton Kincaid versus a year 1 Dalton Kincaid, but missing Stefon Diggs and just all the incorporation of new players, plus having a new offensive system, it being Josh Allen's first year fully in Joe Brady's offense and not being in a Ken Dorsey offense with Joe Brady tweaks, everybody trying to get up to speed. I think there's a lot of things working against this offense outperforming last year's group statistically. That doesn't mean they'll be bad. That doesn't mean things won't still work or click. But I think from a statistical standpoint, it's going to be tough for this pass catching group to outperform last year's group. But again, it is possible, especially if Kincaid takes the jump. We hope he will, especially if Khalil Shakir takes another jump or continues to improve. Hopefully Curtis Samuel can be that guy that he was with Joe Brady in 2020. So there are some things to like. And if Keon Coleman can be more of a plus piece than more of a wait and see trajectory piece, that increases the likelihood as well, obviously. But we'll see. I like this comment here from Joey B saying, I hope all the wide receivers are good. All 525,600 wide receivers. Yeah, man. They just keep adding to it. I Radley coming in saying Curtis Samuel could shock some folks. He had his most productive year with Joe Brady back in 2020 with Carolina. And, you know, he's got a fun skill set. I think it's a skill set that the offensive coordinator needs to scheme him stuff more open, more so than just like a traditional guy who can win in isolation or a guy who can just get you a bucket at any point. But I do think he has a fun dynamic and element. I liked it more when it was in addition to Stefon Diggs, but still fun element. Great comment here from Joe DeRosa who says, Ant, is it true that Babe will be heavily featured in the next Mad Max? Asking for a friend. So for those of you who don't know what this is, I was on Joe's show earlier tonight at 7:30. And one of the things I talked about was George Miller, the director of the Mad Max series, director, writer, and producer for majority of them. Fun fact, also did Happy Feet, both Happy Feet, and then Babe and Babe Pig in the City. So a fun body of work for Mr. George Miller, and that is what Joe is referencing. And RJ says, marathon night for Ant. Yep, I just did Joe's show. So I did a podcast at 5, and then I did Joe's show at 7:30, and here we are. So it's been a fun time. I'm definitely excited to finally eat dinner after this and go to bed. David says, is it possible, now hear me out, is it possible the Bills actually design and use a screen pass play with this offensive group? Keon Coleman helps that a little bit. Curtis Samuel helps that a little bit. Ray Davis helps that a little bit as well. I will say the biggest hindrance to the Bills screen game, granted there's, you know, design flaws at times and the offensive line plays a role and so on and so forth. The biggest hindrance to the Bills screen game is Josh Allen, positively and negatively. When I say that, I mean screens take, especially not even just if you're talking about like receiver screens, like smoke screens, bubble screens, tunnel, stuff like that. His ball placement isn't necessarily great. His feet, his arm angles, he's throwing stuff low. He's throwing stuff out high. He's throwing stuff in front of guys. Your timing and rhythm has to be so good with those wide receiver screens where your guy comes and it's just placed. It's almost handed to him and he can get upfield. If you're throwing it where he's got to stop and reach or stop and make an athletic catch or catch something off frame or off radius, you're losing like a quarter to a half a second, and that is a death sentence. when it comes to the screen game. So Allen has to be better with his ball placement on wide receiver screens. And then even just stuff with running backs out of the backfield, that also takes timing. That takes some selling and some acting. That takes the right trajectory on the ball, the right pace, all of it, for in terms of actually throwing it versus the motion of actually throwing it. So Allen has to improve in that area. And then also, rushers don't sell out coming after Josh Allen because they know the threat of the run exists. So you've got guys always with their eyes on Allen in case he runs or escapes. And when that happens and teams are playing more cautiously, they're able to read those running backs out of the backfield. They're able to see or sniff out those screens and attack and go from there. So I do think there are some things working against this team that, again, come down to Josh Allen. There's a reason why it seems like year after year, Dable and then Dorsey and then even Brady would agree, like the screen game hasn't been overly prevalent. I think it really comes down to Josh Allen. But with having some guys who function better in that area and maybe Brady being able to potentially tap into something or unlock something, who knows? Maybe you'll get a better piece. What's up, Daniel? Appreciate you being here. Carl, what's up, Carl? Carl says ESPN's Mike Clay put out his 2024 projections, and he has Josh Allen throwing for 3,704 yards with 23 TDs and 12 INTs. Dang, that's it. Wow. What are my projections? He said, well, what are your projections? Meaning mine. Oh, let's see. Let me go back to the Bills. I need to see. I don't even, off the top of my head, I don't. Let me see what his, so I'm assuming that's regular season. So I'm going to go to regular season for Josh Allen. So Allen, wow, that's a severe drop. So Allen last year threw for 4,307 yards, 29 TDs, and 18 interceptions. I think the 12 interceptions is pretty safe from Mike Clay. I don't think anybody's coaching that yin and yang aspect out of Josh Allen. We're going to continue to see some turnover where he plays with his arm. So I think the 12 interceptions is pretty safe. I put him anywhere from like 12 to 15 interceptions. That's just like who he is and how he plays. But if the run game is super prevalent and the play action game builds upon that, like I think it will and think it should, we could see less for that. I'm going to say higher than 3,700. I think he'll come in closer to like 4,000. So anywhere from like 38 to like 4,100 yards, I think is a 3,800 to 4,100 is pretty safe. And then I think he'll hit 25 touchdowns minimum, but I think 30 is a decent play. The only way he doesn't hit like 30 passing touchdowns as a safe marker is if he's just running in more, or the Bills are running in more. If the run game really cooks to the point that, you know, Cook has 5 rushing touchdowns and Ray Davis has 4 and Ty Johnson has 3 and then Allen has like 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. I think you'll still see that touchdown projection, but I don't think he's crazy off. And considering how well his projections go usually and how renowned he is, I don't think it's too crazy, but I do think Allen will surpass the yardage and touchdown pieces, maybe interceptions as well. Baked Bills fan says, do you think Kyer could beat out Benford or Rasul for one of the starting jobs in camp? This actually ties into one of the questions that we're going to be bringing up later. I don't. I would love the idea of Kyer Elam becoming a more consistent and regular piece in this Bills defense. I'm not there yet. You know, we had him in the Cover One film room last year. Dude is so smart, tremendous football IQ, and everyone knows the raw ability and the traits and the speed and the length and the size and the frame and all that kind of stuff. But until I see him stop being so grabby and until I see him stop panicking at the top of routes, I just can't. I'm not even confident in Kyer Elam being corner 3 right now for this Bills team. I want to. I would love for Kyer to be corner 3 this year and then take over for Rasul next year, and it's Elam and Benford. I just don't have faith in Kyer Elam right now. I really, really want to, and I think the flashes are there, but there's far too many flashes of the inconsistency, far too many flashes of the negative and the worrisome aspects that just pushes him towards such a piece of inconsistency. Mazdaholic says, I think people are overreacting. Man, my street is crazy all night. I got the windows open. It's a beautiful night. It's usually quiet and nice. And I just got like bikes and crazy loud vans and trucks driving down the street all night. So if you hear that, shout out to those people. Mazdaholic says, I think people are overreacting about a lack of wide receiver 1. They're going into the season planning on Kincaid being the number 1 target. I agree. Dalton Kincaid is pass catching option 1. The offense from a passing perspective will funnel through him. I think the concern about a lack of a wide receiver 1 is who's supporting Kincaid. Like, how does that support look? Because Kincaid, functioned last year in an offense with Gabe Davis and Stefon Diggs. So known quantity pieces that were able to work, and especially Diggs being a true one and having the gravity that he had. Now you're taking a year 2 Dalton Kincaid and you are placing all that weight and expectation schematically and statistically of a wide receiver 1 or pass catcher 1 onto Dalton Kincaid. So if they're planning on him being the target, like, which I agree that they are, can he live up to those plans and those expectations? And then even within that, what does the rest of the wide receiver room look like in terms of supporting him and being auxiliary pieces to him in order to help him succeed, in order for him to be able to get open and not face disadvantageous matchups? I think, like, for me, I do agree that people are overreacting to a degree, but for me, the conversation and the lack of a wide receiver 1 really comes down to a lack of a known quantity. And even though I think Kincaid is going to be pass catching option 1, I worry about the support. What does that look like? Is Curtis, because we don't know what Keon Coleman's going to be. We know what Curtis Samuel is, and we think we know what Khalil Shakir is, but Shakir could be even better. But is a better Shakir and a known quantity Curtis Samuel enough support for Dalton Kincaid? And I don't know if that is, and I think that's what concerns me. Oh, I Radley says, training camp dark horse. I got one. I'm going to use one of the, there's several that I think the Bills drafted. I'm going to go with a UDFA. Corey Couch, the corner from Miami, slot corner from Miami, physical, jams, reroutes dudes in their stem, tackles, hits, comes forward. Obviously played with Adai, who is now the Buffalo Bills secondary coach or corners coach here in Buffalo. So familiarity with him. I think Couch is a sneaky one, especially with, who's the backup nickel? Is it Cam Lewis? I know he's got some safety slot flex, but then you draft in Cole Bishop. So is Cam Lewis necessary? Who's the backup slot? Which is something I'm always worried about. I think Corey Couch, UDFA from the University of Miami, is going to be a fun one. Daniel says, what kind of numbers do you expect from Keon Coleman in his rookie year? This is one of the Keon Coleman projection is super hard for me. I really could see Coleman this year and just his career going a variety of ways, because I think the spectrum, there's so much variance that exists on that spectrum for him in terms of as a rookie, but overall his career trajectory. I could see him as a player 4 years from now, going towards that second contract where he's a high-end wide receiver 2 or low-end wide receiver 1, or he's a guy that just keeps seeing 1-year contracts because teams think, hey, no, I can finally tap into him. I can finally get him locked in. I can finally take advantage of the skill set and the traits and all that kind of stuff. He has such variance. As far as his rookie year, man, let me go to, again, we'll go from regular season numbers. So from a reception standpoint last year, just from the regular season alone, Diggs had 107 catches, Kincaid 73, Gabe Davis 45, Cook 44, Shakir 39, Knox 22. I'm just going to stop there. Those are the top 6. I think James Cook sees an uptick in receptions this year. I think Cook is going to push 65 catches this year, just because of how Brady uses his running backs. I think Cook is going to be a significant part of the offense, running the football and as a pass catcher, either in terms of an outlet guy that Allen can dump the ball down to, and or the designed plays for the running backs out of the backfield, like we saw Brady already use last year for him and for Ty Johnson. So I think Cook's receptions are going to go up. Kincaid's obviously are going to go up. Shakir should as well. Ooh, I think, what numbers do I expect from Keon Coleman? I'm going to say ballpark 50 catches. I'm going to say 45 to 50 catches, 500 to 600 yards, and then 7 or 8 touchdowns. Just looking off of the numbers last year and what I kind of anticipate. Maybe the yards are even down more, depending on, it's really going to be how much he can live as a contested catch guy and a route runner. He's so hard to predict because he lacks refinement as a route runner. He lacks precision and sharpness and crispness in his releases, in his stems, and on his breaks. And then the route tree as a whole, it needs work as well. So he's such a projection that it's really tough, but those are my numbers. RJ says, can you win a Super Bowl without a wide receiver 1 or a top 5 OC? Or yeah, I think you can win a Super Bowl without a wide receiver one. Or oh, you mean like if you don't have either? Yeah, it's going to be super tough. It just means your defense has to click and your run game has to be sick. Like I think you can definitely. You just got to run the football and play really good defense. Granted, those are things that are easier said than done. But fair. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum, ba, ba. Ooh, Franzo coming in here saying the chance that VPG, aka Cedric Van Pran Granger, I'm doing that for forever now because I keep getting tongue tied every time. Cedric Van Pran Granger, rookie center from Georgia, will forever on this show be known as VPG. That's it, or SVPG. That'll be it. So Franzo says chance that VPG, and Franzo knows this because he saw the episode that I did with Bruce and he's already got the lingo down. Franzo says chance that VPG takes the starting center. I think having consistent O-line significantly helped Cook and the other running backs. One changing position is better than two. So I echo that sentiment. I'd rather keep Connor McGovern at guard and then have a new center. I think there's a decent chance that VPG wins that role. I'm going to give it like a 45% chance that he takes the starting center job. Because also think of it too, it could happen in two ways. VPG could just function so well at center that they want to move McGovern back to guard, or McGovern could be struggling at center to the point that they want to move him back to guard, or David Edwards is struggling at guard, so they want to put McGovern back to mitigate that. So there's multiple avenues and multiple ways that you can get to that end result of having McGovern back at left guard and VPG at center. So I'm going to put it at about a 45%. RJ says, Greg Cosell said Diggs was a wide receiver too last 2 years. I don't know what the context of that is. Is he saying like from a tape standpoint, a production standpoint? And again, to each his own, but I don't know. We'll see what he is going forward. I think last year he still functioned as a wide receiver one. And I see the year that L'Jarius Sneed had and how everybody talked about him. And I watched Diggs beat him or get behind him or beat him underneath, or how good Jalen Ramsey is. And I watched Diggs beat Jalen Ramsey vertical and get behind him and beat him underneath. I don't see how he's a wide receiver two last year. Maybe he is this year going forward, but also in the last 2 years, no, I disagree with that. You're not the gravity that he carries, man. Like the Patriots are out there covering him with three dudes. Even the Chiefs are double covering him and bracketing him every chance. If he was a wide receiver two, or if he really was washed and had that trickle-down effect of not being that guy anymore, Spags isn't treating him like the problem that he is. Like, even with Sneed, he had a safety over the top. And if Sneed wasn't, he's clouding, he's bracketing. Like, he is making sure Diggs cannot do anything because of how much of a focal point he is. Pete says the top three of Shakir, Samuel, and Coleman isn't great on paper. Allen needs to elevate them until proven otherwise. I agree. There are question marks that exist with this wide receiver grouping, and they either need to elevate themselves or Allen needs to do it. Big Bills fan says, would you have drafted Tez Walker or Troy Franklin over Carter at the end of the third if you were the GM? No. I would have taken Tez Walker in the fourth. I would have considered Troy Franklin. I wasn't very high on either. I thought Troy Franklin was very overrated in terms of what he was coming out of this draft. I thought he was a one-trick pony in terms of being a vertical guy and a speed guy, which was fun, and it was a one trick, but I thought his route running wasn't great. The lack of physicality and plays at the catch point were a bit concerning. I didn't think he was a good route runner. A lot of his routes came in a vertical stem, and anything that required horizontal movement or good feet or the type of like sharpness and crispness that you want to see in routes, I didn't think he exhibited that. And then Tez was just wildly inconsistent with catches, with his route running, but he was a burner, tremendous stride, could get vertical. I would have considered either of them in the fourth. I wasn't really high on either, and I would not have taken either over Dwayne Carter at the end of the third. I would have taken Cam Kitchens over Cole Bishop, but that is me. I would have rather taken, I wish the board fell differently and they got Michael Hall where they got Cole Bishop, and then I wish they got Cam Kitchens where they got Dwayne Carter. You hear the car horn? It's chaos out there. Nonstop. JG says there's something to be said about with Diggs' production in critical moments and down the stretch, whether you think he's washed or not, he hasn't played his best football. See, with that, though, how do we know, or why is the thought that he hasn't played his best football and not that teams are double and triple covering him and somebody else has to eat and he's not? I hear and see it all the time with like Oh, like he hasn't performed in the playoffs. Why do you think Gabe Davis balled out against Kansas City in the 13 seconds game? Because of all the traffic and attention that Stefon Diggs was commanding and all that. It happens with KC every time. Literally, Spags' number one thing is do not let Stefon Diggs go off. And he has done that consistently. And he's had to make others win and beat him. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that Diggs has been great down the stretch tremendously or in the playoffs, but there's been multiple years where he's been banged up, confirmed and unconfirmed, and defenses just give him that tremendous attention. I think if anything, Diggs' production in critical moments or down the stretch, I think is more reflective of a lack of supporting cast for Stefon Diggs than it is a knock on Stefon Diggs. Now, yes, I understand the other side of that if he's truly the wide receiver one and that dude that you need him to be, he needs to win no matter what. And I get it. And I think there is some merit to that. But I think the attention they were able to give Stefon Diggs was indicative of not being scared of Gabe Davis, not being scared of Dawson Knox, especially, with Cole Beasley being removed and the lack of a slot presence and true separator on the inside. It allowed teams to focus more on Stefon Diggs and give him attention and put a safety over the top and cloud him or give him legitimate bracket coverage and make someone else try and beat you. So I do think there's something to be said with his production in critical moments and down the stretch. I don't necessarily think it's an indictment on Diggs as much as it is reflective of what has been around him and the system and execution in pairing with that. Oh, Sespinar says, what is the worst stat line where you would still be optimistic? What's the worst stat line for Coleman where you would still be optimistic he could be a wide receiver 1 or 2 in the future? Does he get more leeway being so young? For me, it's got nothing to do with the stat line. It's purely what I see on film. If he's showing route running progression, if he's showing more deception, if he's showing an understanding of pace, if he's got more sharpness or suddenness or crispness to his routes, where he's starting to use that physicality and that size and frame in other ways, or he's starting to manipulate corners and use his size and length to his advantage, things that show more nuance and evolution and technicality and refinement at the receiver spot, that's going to make me optimistic. I don't care if Keon Coleman comes out and has like 800 yards and 12 touchdowns, but they're all like contested catch ball winning scenarios. It's fun on paper, but I'm still a little worried because I don't necessarily think that's sustainable. Like the tape is what I'm going to be most, or keeping my eyes on the most. So the stat line won't be too influential on what I think he is because the stats aren't going to be indicative of what he is as a player going forward. But I think it's fair to have that. Michael says, I think the Bills offense will be top 2 in the league. Fair. Jim Jack says, Diggs and Davis had to go. I can give you 4 to 5 examples of both of them trying to show up Allen after bad plays. Not great teammates, captains, if you ask me. Okay. I appreciate Daniel. Daniel says, hit that like button for Anthony, the hardest working man in Bills coverage. I appreciate you being here. And thank you very much for saying that. That's very nice. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. JG says, I think the design on screen games was better under Brady, but every time he did the wide receiver screen with Diggs, he took the ball and turned away from the line of scrimmage. Yeah, Diggs wasn't great on him. I also think there's how many balls on screens did Allen throw into the dirt? Or did Allen lead Diggs into getting crushed? And it just wasn't great. The first one of the Chargers game, he skips off the dirt to Diggs. I don't think Diggs was necessarily the most receptive to being used on those screens. I also don't think Allen was a good thrower to him. But, to each their own. Sophia, I like this one. She says, Ant, will Travis Clayton use his 6'7", 300-pound body to return kickoffs? The new rules allow picking up running speed before the gunner arrives and rugby players can catch. This is the best question. I love this, and I hope so. That would be awesome. I hope they use him as this special teams tank. That would be sick. I like that. I like that a lot. K. Omori says, speaking of Russian TDs, who pushes Allen's butt at the goal line? Ray Davis or Ty Johnson? Oh, Eric saying, I'm hearing a ton of respectable people talk highly of Ray Davis, especially his goal line and pass blocking. Yeah, he's got the size. He's good around the goal line. He's good in tight quarters. He's got that make you miss in a phone booth type of agility in and around the line of scrimmage, leaking out of the backfield. I think he could be a sneaky play in the low red zone because of his running style and ability, but also because of what he could do coming out of the backfield, either by design or just leaking out and being QB friendly. Also good in the screen game, but we'll see if that can finally work a little bit. And yeah, he's not the best pass protector. He scans well, he IDs well. Just needs to be consistent in terms of being more of the hammer than the nail and operating with technique, which can be said honestly of so many rookie running backs coming into the league, because pass protection, I think, is really a lost art for running backs, and it's stuff that needs to get coached up once dudes hit the league. There's very few running backs that come into the league that are like pass pro ready right off the jump. Kyron Williams was one coming from Notre Dame, who's now the running back for the Rams. But it's a thing that a lot of dudes have to get coached up on come their transition to the NFL. The big thing you're looking for is just the willingness and the football IQ to see and understand it. Oh, another comment from Daniel. I answered this earlier. I like where a lot of people's heads are at in terms of wondering if VPG beats out anybody for a starting offensive line spot. Oh, I like this from K-Mac. Saying, I think wide receiver 1 comes next off season when we have money and a bunch of draft picks. Spread the wealth this year. Yeah, the opening cap situation next year with Diggs being gone, and then just the plethora of draft picks they have, plus what the free agent class could look like. That could be very interesting. Man, JG, you're really on one about Diggs. I think the loss of Diggs is being overstated here and in the national media. The idea that Diggs drew doubles and coverage schemes. Who was Snead covering in the playoff game? I like, even if say Snead doesn't cover Diggs once in the playoff game, that's one game out of the multitude of games down the stretch. Like, I'm watching the tape and seeing teams double and triple cover Stefon Diggs, put L'Jarius Snead on him, put a safety over the top and give him attention. Like, we see that. But we'll see. Wow. Enough about Diggs, Anthony. We did much better, but I'm answering the questions in the comments. The chats are asking about Stefon Diggs, so I'm answering questions about Stefon Diggs. Oh, this is a good one from JG saying, are we due for some positive injury luck? I know everyone's down on the Bills, and Allen can't. So sorry for the loud noise. And Allen can't beat Mahomes, but we played the Chiefs to the wire without a back seven. I really do think the Bills beat the Chiefs in the divisional round if they just had some semblance of health on defense, especially Terrel Bernard, or even Rasul Douglas, who I know played in that game, but he was so banged up and so hurt that you can just see how he was moving. Like, Rasul Douglas was not in the right state physically to be moving in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is ridiculous. Yeah, he was not in the right state to be covering in that game against the Chiefs. You could see when he really tried to open it up and run long and try to stride things out, like he just wasn't in the right state of mind, not state of right state physically. But I do think, man, if the Bills are a little healthier on defense, I think it's a different game. Or even who knows if Allen completes that pass to Shakir on that second down, or if he throws it to Kincaid on that third down and extends that last drive, or even if Tyler Bass makes that field goal and ties it up. Maybe Mahomes fumbles the snap on the next drive and the Bills get the ball back. And like, there's a million of end scenarios that still could have worked out in the Bills' favor, even with all the injuries. But yeah, if the Bills are a little healthier on defense, could have seen that. It would have been interesting there. Walter says, my question is, what teams is the model that we're inspired by to prove you can win a Super Bowl without a clear-cut number one pass catcher? Kelsey has been pass catcher his whole career, so not the Chiefs. I said wide receiver 1 without a true wide receiver 1. I don't know if you're directing this to me or towards people in general. You have to have like a true pass catcher 1. Like, I think, especially in today's NFL. I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily have to be a wide receiver. It could be a tight end. If Dalton Kincaid can replicate some of that Kelsey piece, I think that, but again, I think that's more of the exception than the rule. Or even if you look at like what, again, maybe you can say this is an exception too, but those Pats teams that had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, like if you just have some sort of mismatch creator, I think that can work a little bit. Even the Niners going a couple years ago, granted, they had a really good defense and it was a Shanahan offense, but the run game, Kittle was probably pass catcher 1. This was before like Debo really took off and Ayuk really took off. I think Ayuk was still in Shanahan's doghouse back then at that time, but you do need a true pass catcher 1. It can be a tight end. Obviously, it's usually more of a receiver, but you need to have a defined pass catcher 1 to some degree. Also, I just realized I didn't fully answer this from JG. Are we due for some positive injury luck? Potentially, yes. I think what's worrisome about the injury piece is how, for as much maligned as the Bills were with injuries and how hurt they were last year everywhere, they were so healthy on the offensive line. I worry if that both of those pendulums swing. I worry if they're more healthy overall, but then are so banged up on the O line. Like the odds of your offensive line staying healthy for the entirety of a season is a rarity and a thing that does not happen a lot. So I think we'll see some more positive injury luck overall as a team, but I worry that one or two dudes get banged up on the O line just because there's going to be some regression both ways with how banged up they were non offensive line related and then how healthy they were offensive line related in terms of that piece. Oh, this is a good one from Spin. Who wins the punting job? Martin, Hawk, or Browning? Oh, I don't know. I'm torn. I'm going to say Browning just to spice it up. See what happens. Walter saying Diggs averaged 92 yards in our 5 playoff wins. That's far from nothing. You can argue the biggest issue was never pairing him with a legit wide receiver 2 to open him up. Very fair. I'm gonna stay off the Diggs stuff. I see people going forward and just the anger. You gotta chill out, man. Like who's saying we should have kept Diggs and gotten rid of Allen? Like nobody's saying that. This way you just can't have. You just want to have like a fun discourse and some dialogue. There's no reason to have to pick it like one thing. I'm not going to do Diggs stuff for a little bit. We'll go forward and see. It's just not healthy. Sophia, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for the super chat. She says, Travis Clayton is the first NFL ogre back, and smash the like. Thank you very much for that. If you folks have not already smashed the like, please smash the like here on this video. It helps myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So please, and thank you. RJ loves ogre back. Yeah, I like that. I do like that a lot. I had my wife come in and shut the window because the motorcycles outside and the vans and everything that was going on, it was just too much. What else do we got? 13 says if the scheme is good, we don't need a Diggs. We just need them to do their part. Good run game and scheme players open. I think that's what the idea is for this year. And I like it. I think the Bills have a good run game that they showed last year. So you lean into the run and then you lead into the basketball lineup that you have at wide receiver. So, plus Kincaid. So Kincaid and Coleman and Samuel and Shakir, and then Dawson Knox fits into that. James Cook fits into that coming out of the backfield. Ty Johnson and Ray Davis fit into that. I think you've got a lot of scheme ability given the skill sets and players that are on this team, and then kind of just work it with each game. And I think Brady, I think the running backs is going to be the biggest one in terms of the run game, but also just in the pass game. Like I really do think Cook is going to see an uptick in touches, both in the run and within the pass, and those running backs are going to eat. And it will be a nice piece as well, especially if you're running the ball and you're coming into these heavier personnel looks or condensed formations. Like the space can work to your advantage if you shift out of those formations, or if you just use play action or, those front side nakeds like they did on that Ty Johnson touchdown against the Jets. So it's some fun pieces. Comment here saying people don't realize how special this defense could have been if they didn't have the injuries that happened during the season. Yeah, I wish you could have seen more Milano and Bernard together. That would have been a really, 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 really fun piece. Really fun piece. All right, I want to grab one of the questions that now the chat has kind of slowed a little bit. We've caught up. I'm going to keep going through and cycling through things in the chat, obviously. But I'm probably going to chill on the Diggs stuff. I know people keep mentioning Diggs, and I was responding to a lot of that, but I don't want the whole conversation to be about Stefon Diggs. As much as I want to engage with the chat, I don't want to just do Stefon Diggs. This is a good question that I got in response to one of the Twitter threads. It's at this moment, do you feel better about the edge position group, the interior defensive line position group, or the cornerback position group? This was from Dean Kindig on Twitter, who's awesome. And I really liked that question. It was one of the favorite ones that I got. And I initially thought I was going to say edge because I am concerned about the edge grouping. But when I look at it, I honestly think my answer is corner, and I didn't expect to say that when that question was asked. So if we look at the edge grouping, Rousseau is an edge one. I think he's an edge one against the run, but I think he's more of an edge two from a pass rush standpoint. Could be an edge one by the end of this year, overall and against the pass. But we know what Rousseau is. Aside from Rousseau, AJ Epinesa is an edge three. Maybe he can become an edge two. Von Miller is anybody's guess. I think he's going to be somewhere between an edge three and an edge two. And then you look at the rest of the grouping, right? That they had in prior to this past week or last week. So Casey Toohill, they draft Javon Solomon. You have Cameron Klein. You have Kingsley Jonathan. I like the Dwan Smoot signing from Jacksonville. I think he gives you a high floor at edge four, gives you the opportunity to compress the pocket, smart, veteran, length, physicality, also can reduce down and be on the interior defensive line in some passing down situations. He tore his Achilles in week 16 of 2022. Didn't play until middle of October last year, and then was on the record in mid to late November saying that he was just starting to feel like he would had he had done a training camp. So he was nowhere near 100% in 2023. If he can get to his pre-Achilles form, Smoot is a nice signing for this group. And then I like the idea of, Kingsley Jonathan or Javon Solomon kind of rounding out the group as edge five and giving you some pass rush pop in some way, shape, or form. But I look at that grouping, and granted, you need at least four edges because of how much the Bills rotate and teams in general rotate nowadays. But I thought my answer was going to be edge. And I'm fine with the interior defensive line. Daquan Jones comes back. You draft Dwayne Carter. You sign Austin Johnson. You have Deshaun Williams. I like Ilianku. I don't think there's a ton of high-level, top-tier depth. And there are some pieces that worry me about the interior. But from a starting front four perspective or top four perspective, I'm okay. Have some cause for concerns with the top four for the edge grouping. But I look at corner, and we talked about it earlier with the question about Kaiir Elam. Corner one is Rasul Douglas. Corner two is Christian Benford, and I think that's a solid 1-2 pairing. And then corner three and corner four are Kaiir Elam and Jamarcus Ingram. And I do not feel holistically confident in that grouping. If Douglas or Benford go down, Elam steps in, and I don't feel great about that. I do like Jamarcus Ingram, but more from a slot perspective. But with him being on the outside, we'll see what he could potentially be. I am concerned about the corner grouping. It's part of the reason before Diggs got traded, I thought corner was a sneaky spot the Bills could go at the end of round one. So it worries me a bit to see what happens with this corner grouping. As Charles says, yeah, Benford has dealt with injuries too. Yeah, Benford's been going back to his rookie year when he broke his hand or his thumb. He continues to pick up knocks. He was out. He got hurt in that Steelers game in the playoffs. Like, he just seems to continuously get banged up. And corner is a spot that gets banged up in general, right? Either you're in the play so much, covering dudes, coming down, force player in the run, making tackles. It's easy to get banged up if you're a corner. So you need a solid three, maybe even like a solid four. And for as much as, I know this will probably make a bunch of people upset, like for as non-sexy as Dane Jackson was, and I understand, the lack of what he could be as a top-end player, I just felt comfortable with Dane Jackson as a corner three. He was a dude who could start in some spots. He could function as a low-end CB2 at times. Yes, he had areas where he was lacking and kind of lacked that ceiling or top-end ability, but he would give you consistency at that spot. I do not think the Bills have that aspect right now in terms of corner. Kaiir can make some great plays, and he has, but I don't think the consistency is there in his game right now, just again, with how grabby he is and how much he panics at certain parts in the stems and in the routes. So I am most concerned out of the edge grouping, interior defensive line, and cornerbacks. I am most worried about the corner grouping. I did not expect to say that going into that question because edge is still a concern for me, but I think there's enough of a floor that my bigger concern with edge is the top end talent or production coming out of that edge grouping, right? Because if Von isn't Von Miller, which I think it's a lot to ask of him to be that, rightly or wrongly, with the injuries. Like, is Rousseau going to be give you a top tier, like edge one type of production or presence? Even if Epinesa plays like an edge two, which would be an improvement for him, you're still lacking a true edge one. But similar to the receiver part where you have all these depth guys, I think you have good overall depth. Like you have a whole bunch of edge 3 and edge 4 dudes on this Bills roster. So the floor is fine. And then you can mix and match and rotate and do whatever you want. So I worry about the top end talent, but corner, I'm just worried at overall. Like you've got 2 solid corners in Douglas and Benford. And then, man, it's questions at corner 3. It's questions at corner 4. If something happens to both Benford and Douglas, it's a red alert situation. Even if something happens to one of them, I'm still not holistically confident. Yeah, I am a bit worried when it comes to the Bills corner grouping. And again, I think it's a sneaky need. We'll see what happens too going forward because Rasul Douglas is, they chose to restructure him, not necessarily extend him. So he is a UFA after this season. So do they need a new corner 1 last year? Do they need a corner 2 next year? What does Benford's trajectory look like? The corner grouping is an interesting one. And I really like that question from Dean. Another question that came through from Charlie. What are they going to do with the Trey monies that come through? So when the money, the savings from Trey White kick in after June 1st, and he asked, what are they going to do with that? Are they going to go after a center fielder on defense, more wide receivers, pass rush, or do they need all $10 million in the slush fund? I'm interested to see what it shakes out with in terms of how much they actually get. I don't rule out a move for edge. If the Bills hadn't signed Smoot, my money would have been, no pun intended, would have been on them going after like a Marcus Golden or somebody that's still kicking around on that free agent edge market that has some pass rush upside. So basically trying to recreate the Leonard Floyd situation from last year where you bring in a proven vet with pass rush productivity and pop off the edge, and you bring him in June. Somebody who's looking to come in on a 1-year deal for a contender. You're able to give them like $4 to $6 million, and then you kind of go from there. Now with them bringing in Smoot, I wonder, like, is it a veteran corner? I have to take a look at the free agent markets and kind of see what they fully look like, but I do think corner is such a sneaky need for this team because after Benford and Douglas, what do you think like happens at that spot? And again, maybe too in this Kyrie Elam conversation, I know this is something that I've said before and other people have said, maybe the new defense, maybe Bobby Babich and Adai and the coaching on that side, maybe there is more man coverage and maybe it unlocks Kyrie's confidence in who he is. The pushback I have to that is, people saying like, oh, well, Kyrie wasn't succeeding because it was a zone defense and he's a man corner. Okay, when he was in man, though, he wasn't lights out. Like, that's where he was grabbing and clutching, whether it was man or, like, man-match zone type of stuff. That's where he's grabbing and leaning and panicking. Like, it's not like he was a stalwart in man. When he was in man, that's when he was grabbing and clutching and doing all that stuff that needed work. So I'm hoping Kyrie gets unlocked, but I think if they have any money available further, it's going after a potential corner in some way, shape, or form that could be a corner 3 or a corner 4 and just kind of add to the floor or round out that grouping potentially. Comment here from Pete saying if Milano and Benford are healthy, I think we'll see that attacking style of D we got when the D was healthy early in the season last year. Yeah. I'm assuming you mean Bernard. Oh, and from the comments, yeah, you do. Yeah. So if Milano and Bernard are healthy, I think we'll see that attacking style of D. Also, it also works if you mean Milano and Benford are healthy because Benford wasn't healthy last year too. I do think you will see that. I think the defense that we saw earlier in the year with simulated pressures and creeper pressures, 5-man stuff, some of the cross dog blitzes that they use towards the back end of the year, I do think you will see that. Terrel Bernard and Tremaine Edmonds are two vastly different style of linebacker. You want Edmonds in coverage because of his size and frame and athleticism. And not that Bernard isn't athletic and good in coverage, because he is, and he's tremendously intelligent. But Bernard is so good as a blitzer. Like, he coming forward as a heat-seeking missile and taking on linemen or taking on running backs trying to block him, or just his timing and his understanding of the most efficient routes and angles to the quarterback and how he loops and what he does. So yeah, I do expect to see that attacking style of defense, which is still what this defense is going to be, right? One gap, penetrating, come forward, make plays, and then having Daquan Jones come back, having Ed Oliver, having Dwayne Carter, having Austin Johnson, guys that can either occupy blockers or get penetration and get through and cause havoc and chaos and allow those second-level defenders to stay clean. like Bernard, like Milano, like Taron Johnson. Yeah, I do think we will continue to see that offensive or that attacking style of defense. More, not necessarily blitzing from a 5 or 6 man perspective, but I'm more simulated pressures, more creepers where you're still rushing only 4, but you're dropping an edge and blitzing a linebacker. You're dropping a defensive tackle and blitzing Taron Johnson. Things like that to try and confuse protection schemes, pairing that with some disguised coverages on the back end, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I do think you will see that piece. Oh, who replaces Taron Johnson eventually? Bills base D as nickel. That's a really good question. I mean, they just re-upped him for 3 years, which I think is tremendously important. That's low-key a huge worry of mine every single year. If Taron Johnson goes down, I am very fearful for what happens to this Bills defense because of the demand mentally and physically that is required of nickel corners. Physically being on on an island and having to face that two-way go. And it's not just slot receivers anymore. It used to just be, okay, yeah, we got to cover in the slot against 90 different versions of Wes Welker and Cole Beasley. Now it's like, okay, Cooper Kupp's going to go in the slot and Justin Jefferson's going to go in the slot. And like teams will put their wide receiver 1 in the slot to kind of mess with you and see if you can work that. So Taron Johnson going down is a huge worry for me. If he goes down this year, a sneaky like for me. If you're talking eventually who replaces him, I don't think that guy is on the roster right now. So we'll have to see. So I don't think there's an answer for that right now. And also with him signing that extension, I don't think that's a conversation you have to have until several years from now. If he gets banged up this year, my wish would be to put Cole Bishop in for Taron Johnson, and then you have Edwards and Rapp on the back ends. I don't know what's going to happen with safety in general. I don't know if Cole Bishop's going to be a start. I don't know who's going to start between Bishop, Edwards, and Rapp. But even if Bishop is one of your 2 starting safeties, if Taron Johnson goes down, I'm putting Cole Bishop at slot, and then I'm starting Rapp and Mike Edwards on the back end. I really like Cole Bishop the closer he gets to the line of scrimmage. I like him less the further and farther he gets. So put him in as that big nickel, apex, slot type of dude. Blitz him off the edge, rush him, let him live in and around the box and line of scrimmage. That would be what I would do regardless. So even if he's on the bench and not playing, Taron Johnson goes down, I'm putting in Cole Bishop for Taron Johnson. If Bishop is one of your starting safeties and Taron Johnson goes down, I'm bringing Cole Bishop down. It just works from a coverage standpoint, but also from a run fitting and run defense standpoint. And as Pete says here, I think we need to draft someone to specifically back up Taron, let alone replace him someday. It even took Taron time to become who he is. Yeah. That's why I wasn't like completely against the notion of taking like an Andrew Phillips, like corner from Kentucky, or Mike Sanderstill from Michigan, guys who can work outside, but who also like work in the slot and are dogs, like who have that inside outside versatility, or why I like Chris Abrams-Drain or Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville, like guys who have that inside outside versatility, but can be a long-term support piece. To Taron Johnson. I appreciate you, Frozen Goat, saying that's a great suggestion. My hope as well. Bishop has a high IQ. He absolutely does. Baked Bills fan says, I don't think Bishop is a great tackler, though. He struggles mostly coming from depth. So when he's already like around the line of scrimmage and in the box, he's okay. The biggest misses for him and worries for me, I don't love Cole Bishop overall. I think he's fine. He was my safety 6, but I don't really view him as a traditional safety. I view him as more of like an apex monster man, like putting him around the line of scrimmage. Like I don't want him as a single high safety deep. I don't even really want him all the time as a 2 high safety deep. I want him as like a linebacker, apex safety hybrid, anything in and around the line of scrimmage, coming forward as a robber, coming down as a buzz safety, blitzing off the edge, all that kind of stuff. So when Bishop struggles the most, it's when he's as a traditional safety deeper and then has to come downfield and fit the run from depth. But when he's closer to the line of scrimmage already around the snap, he's usually fine. I like this comment here from Pete saying, I really wanted Tyke Smith because he played that role well at Georgia. I would have liked that as well, especially because I don't know how he was going to transition to the NFL as more of a traditional safety versus being more of a slot apex and that Brian Branch kind of role, because he didn't really see a ton of deep safety snaps at Georgia. The starting safeties for them, quote unquote, were, starting Malachi Starks and then Javon Bullard. And then Tyke played that apex role. But yeah, I would have loved Tyke Smith because then he's that backup to Taron Johnson in like that big nickel enforcer type of role. But also you can work him in as with some safety stuff and help him learn that position to transition to safety and maybe take over as the safety next year, knowing that he can still be the backup apex as well, which would be a nice piece. Yeah, he's physical, punishes blockers. Again, I don't know how well he was going to transition in terms of being like a deep safety regularly. But yeah, if you're looking at somebody to fulfill that slot or apex piece, yeah, I like Tyke Smith a bunch. All right, I want to grab those two because they were connected. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum, ba, ba. Oh, good question here from Steve saying, when was the last time it was this hard to predict the 53-man roster prior to training camp? There must be close to 20 spots totally up for grabs. I think it's actually a fair point. I don't think we really know a lot of what this we haven't seen this kind of turnover for the Bills since Beane and McDermott first took over. And Sammy went bye-bye and Darby went bye-bye and everybody kind of saw the writing on the wall a little bit there. Yeah, I don't remember the last time it was this. There hasn't been a time this hard to predict the 53-man in the Beane McDermott era since the Bills really started to take off. Like we've kind of known, for better or for worse, year after year, who and what this team was going to be. Yes, there'd be some different schematic or philosophical tweaks within each year, but we really kind of had an idea. This one's a good one. Like even safety is the conversation, right? Like you might feel one way or the other. I could really see any of the safeties starting. Like if you told me it's Bishop and Rapp, cool. If you told me it's Rapp and Edwards, cool. If you told me it's Edwards and Bishop, cool. Like I could see a multitude of possibilities. Even at edge, like who are the edges going to, who's going to be edge for? Is it Smoot? Is it Javon Solomon? Is it Casey Toohill? Are they carrying 5 edges or are they carrying 5 interior defensive linemen? What's going on at linebacker? Like who's linebacker 3? Is it Morrow? Is it Deion Jones? Is it Balin Spector? Like what's going on with Dorian Williams? Like who makes the team at the linebacker spots and what type of special teams like ability is there? Like just where are they bringing in guys just because their bodies and so on and so forth? How many wide receivers do they keep? Is it 5? Is it 6? Who's the 6th wide receiver? Yeah, there's a lot of fun questions. And I think even just not just predicting the 53-man, but I think predicting like the starters as well at several positions. There's a lot of questions for this team. But again, I think it goes hand in hand with what we've seen this offseason in free agency and the draft, this kind of revamp that the Bills are going through is significant. Like I'm not going to say it's a rebuild, but it is a revamp. You're trying to reset some things financially. You're trying to evolve the roster in specific areas. And you, depending on how the offense works this year, going with bigger bodied wide receivers and potentially more of an emphasis on the run game, you know, you're going to sit there and see, okay, like, is this sustainable? Is this the direction the team is going to go in regularly? Is this the direction that's going to happen schematically across the league in terms of what the Bills are going to do? So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see. I think this is also a year where like, I mean, I'm always excited for football, and because I watch college football so much and do so much draft evaluation and scouting, I always like preseason ball anyway. But this year, I think the preseason is even more intense and fun because of the rookies that the Bills have, but then also all those 53-man roster questions, right? Like the preseason is going to go a long way towards helping dudes earn jobs and keep jobs. And on the opposite side, potentially lead dudes out the door. Daniel saying, do you think they will trade Hamlin, and should they? I don't think they will, and I don't necessarily think they should. I have him right now. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be the 4th safety on this team. I think you're looking at Rapp. I'm not necessarily in order, but Rapp, Edwards, Bishop, and Hamlin. I think Hamlin is safety 4, unless Kendall Williamson does something. I couldn't remember who like the 5th safety was on the board, or unless, I don't know, do you like maybe they really want the roster spot, and because Cam Lewis is a nickel safety hybrid, they feel more comfortable with Cam Lewis. I don't think they will trade him, and I don't necessarily think that they should. I don't love Hamlin. I don't also dislike him. I think he's fine as like a depth safety, a safety 3, a safety 4. I think you could do better. I also think you could do worse. I'm fine with whatever happens to him. I also think from a worry standpoint, and I hate to throw this out there, I also wonder from like a PR perspective, if they don't want to like trade him or cut him. I don't know like how that looks or how that necessarily gets received. I don't know if that factors into their decision making at all. Just looking at it from all sides and all angles. But I don't think they will trade him, and I don't think that they should. That's a good question. Adam says, "What's the ceiling for Josh in this offense? Year one will be interesting, but when we sign or draft a wide receiver one next year in 2025, or next year 2025 and 2026 is going to be out of this world." Ooh, what's the ceiling for? I think the ceiling is still like they can be a top 10 offense. Like I don't say top five because I think it's hard to consistently be in that area. And it depends on, are you talking top five in points? Are you or even anything like rankings? Are you talking points? Are you talking yards? Are you talking DVOA and efficiency metrics and EPA and things like that? I think this is still going to be the potential to be a top 10 offense. I think the run game is going to be good. I think they're going to generate explosives with play action. And I think we're going to see more of a spread the wealth type of mentality just with how this offense has come together. Like especially from a pass catching standpoint, right? Like, and this is why so many of the mailbag stuff that I got in DMs was all receiver focus. So I kind of bucketed it into that, and we'll kind of use your comment here to kind of lead into this conversation. This offense can still function as is without these crazy pieces or without the true wide receiver ones, but the ceiling and where you're really able to differentiate is going to come down to just how schematically sound Joe Brady in this offense can be. That's going to be the biggest piece, right? Because you don't have this true guy on the outside who can go get you a bucket like Stefon Diggs could. Maybe Dalton Kincaid can be that guy in year two. And I still think tight end is the greatest mismatch generator from an offensive versus defensive standpoint. A true versatile dual threat tight end allows you to do so many things, especially one who has, a pass catching skill set lean like Dalton Kincaid does. But I think, this offense can still be a top 10 offense. I just don't necessarily think it's going to look like it has before. I think there's a good chance this offense is more run focused, run heavy, play action, bootlegs, rollouts, move the pocket, some screens or some quick adjustment stuff and some one hitters. Like I think explosives will be generated in the intermediate area instead of, looking for something 30 or 40 yards downfield. I think it's more, let's look for stuff 15 to 22, 15 to 25. Or generating explosives with the run and grinding, 8 yards a pop, 7 yards on this carry, 15 yards on this carry. I think the run game will matter significantly, but that's good. I think defenses are built to stop the pass and are still built to stop zone runs. So if you can zig while they're zagging, you have an advantage. If you can go with heavier personnel who also can function in the pass game, like Kincaid and like Knox and like Coleman and Mac Hollins and MVS, you can win on the ground and potentially win from a pass catching standpoint schematically as well. I think a lot's going to be put on Joe Brady's shoulders. I think this offense is built to be used. It's built in two ways. I think this offense is built to be carried by a talisman trigger man type of quarterback. We'll see if Allen can be that kind of guy. And I also think it's built to be schematically used by a play designer and play caller. And we'll see if Joe Brady can be that guy, right? And we know what he can do with the running backs, but we'll see from a pass catching standpoint, if he can do that as well with wide receivers, tight ends, so on and so forth, all that stuff. Good question here from Charles. This is actually one of the comments that was sent a lot to me, or questions or concerns, depending on how you want to look at it, in my DMs for this mailbag. Charles says, the Bills faced the most man coverage in the league last year. What's the counter from Brady? I think real quick, Aiden, I did not talk about MVS yet, but we will get to that shortly. Good question. Charles says, the Bills faced the most man coverage in the league last year. What's the counter from Brady? I think a lot of people thought the counter was going to be, okay, get more dudes that can separate, get more guys with speed that can threaten vertically and all that kind of stuff. Based on what the wide receiver room looks like and the moves that they made, I think the counter from Brady is heavier personnel, condensed formations, run the football, and scheme dudes open. So trying to get defenses kind of caught in the wash or caught in the garbage, and using kind of pick plays and rub routes and things like that. Or getting them out of too high looks and taking advantage of Keon Coleman with a one-on-one on the outside, or using play action and hitting a defense in the middle of the field behind the second level, but in front of the third level, because there's that disconnect that was created because, the guys in the box had to respect the run and step forward. So now you've created space between the second and third level there on defense, or just getting Kincaid in advantageous matchups, either with a linebacker or a safety or a nickel corner who can't cover him, or putting him on the outside and see if the team uses their number one or number two traditional outside corner on Kincaid. And then you're looking at the advantage you have in the box, and maybe you're sitting there saying, okay, do we shift and do we now look for Kincaid one-on-one? How does this matchup fit? And even me, I'll throw myself into this bucket. I thought the counter would be getting more separators. I don't think that was what happened based on who they brought in. With Coleman, MVS. Again, we'll see who makes this roster, but Shakir is a separator. Samuel can separate. I don't see him as a traditional or true separator like the Diggs of the world or the Beasleys of the world that have succeeded with Allen in the past. But Shakir has some of that to him. Matt Collins isn't a separator. Keon Coleman isn't a separator. MVS isn't a separator. KJ Hamler is a separator from a speed standpoint, but not necessarily from a route and opening up standpoint. Claypool has some speed, but he's not a route separator that Allen has usually found success with. Kincaid is a separator as well. So we'll see what they can kind of do. It's funny too, because teams used to be scared to play man coverage against the Bills because it would usually lead to like Allen scrambling and being able to beat them. So maybe it's more concepts or blocking schemes that allow him to take advantage of that, and using Allen's more legs in an unscripted or in an off script but kind of design type of mode. So we'll see kind of where they go going forward with that. But I think the counter, again, isn't separation and better route runners. I think that his counter is power, running the football, and having a size advantage, and making defenses have to answer that question from either a speed or size standpoint in figuring out on trying to match it. Where was that comment from Aiden? Did Ant already talk about his feelings about MVS or need to rewind? I'm fine with MVS. He doesn't move the needle for me one way or the other. I think he's somebody to round out the wide receiver room who adds to the floor of the wide receiver room. Can get vertical, can block a little bit, can play on the outside, can play attached or close to the formation, slot, different kind of stuff. I think he gives you a skill set that can wear multiple hats. I don't think he's going to wear any one of those hats tremendously or to a Pro Bowl or all pro level, but I think he's effective in multiple spots, in multiple alignments, in multiple usages. And again, I think he's a good representation of being in the right hands with a triggerman or talisman quarterback, and or the right schemer or play call / designer and an offensive coordinator to take advantage of what he can do. Setting him up for success, putting him in the right situation at the right time, pushing the right buttons, pulling the right levers, that kind of stuff. And I think MVS is representative of that conversation for a lot of these guys. I think Curtis Samuel falls into that bucket. I think Keon Coleman falls into that bucket. These guys who, again, MVS goes into building that basketball lineup at wide receiver, right? Where you're trying to have, a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, power forward, a center. You want someone with length who can play defense. You need some 3-point guys. You need backup point guards and shooting guards. You need some guard versatility. You need guys who can play defense. And again, shoot the three. You can have all of that individually in all these players, or guys who are multiple in all these areas or combinations of it. And I think MVS is that guy who offers you some of that versatility. I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. I think at best, you're probably looking at wide receiver 4 behind Coleman. I'm not saying this in order, but behind Coleman, Shakir, and Curtis Samuel. But from a snap share perspective, who knows? Maybe because of his blocking ability and some vertical presence paired with the power run game and the verticality they want to create with play action, maybe he sees a little more. I do think he makes the team. I do think he will be in the top 5 wide receivers that make the squad. I'm not particularly thrilled with him, but I'm not upset they got him. Again, with where they are financially, these are the type of moves they're going to have to make. It's unfortunate to a degree, but it's kind of the world they have to live in. Sespinar says, does Josh keep his 40 touchdown streak? I think that's a good bar. I agree. I do think he will. Even if he doesn't hit like 30 passing touchdowns, again, like he might only hit 28 or 27 passing touchdowns, but then I think he'll have like 12 or 13 rushing touchdowns. I think 40 is a good bar, even though that's kind of high, but just with the way they play and still use him as the goal line back, and how effective his legs are in and around the low red zone, I think 40 is a pretty good bar. Maybe if you're betting, set the over under at like 37, but I think he's got a fair shot to hit 40 again. Charles saying MBS is really good versus man coverage, ironically. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Oh, I appreciate you, Joseph, saying smash that like button. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, Joseph. If you folks have not already smashed that like button, please, 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 and thank you. 13 says, Ant, are you doing something with Joe Marino? Yeah, I do that exercise every year where we rank myself and several other content creators rank like the 10 most important Bills, 10 most important players for the future of the Buffalo Bills. So I took part in that. Gave my rankings and then did 2 video recordings of the questions that I was asked in terms of follow-ups for that. So that should be coming out shortly. He's putting all that together. And then just in general, yeah, we, no jinx, tend to collaborate a bunch, especially during the off season and trying to plot things out. So I actually plan on having him on the show again coming soon. So we'll look to have that. And then maybe he'll have me on mine again or have me on his. So we'll see. But yeah, there's definitely that group content creator exercise, which is pretty sweet. RJ says, this team really feels like Josh Allen and just a bunch of dudes. No one is really awful, but no one really moves the needle. I think that's fair to a degree. I think Kincaid can be a guy who can step up, though. If you're looking for somebody to replace the level of production and effectiveness that Stefon Diggs had, I think it's Dalton Kincaid. Not just from a mismatch perspective, but from how his skill set works in tandem with what Josh Allen likes. I think right now, I think it's fair I think it's fair either way, right? If you're high on Dalton Kincaid and you think he moves the needle, cool. If you're low on Dalton Kincaid and you don't think he moves the needle, cool. I think from an outside perspective, based on some of the people I've talked to who cover other teams, a common thought is, people are not fearful of Dalton Kincaid. They respect him and think he's a good player, but I don't think teams or at least people who cover other teams, they're not valuing Dalton Kincaid in the way that I know a lot of Bills fans do. Now, I think as the season goes on, we could see a much different tune. I think he could be like one of those breakout stars that takes the league by storm and surprise. Everybody's like, wow, I didn't know he had this in his game. I didn't know he was like this level. And then Bills fans are sitting there being like, yeah, well, we knew it. We tried to tell everybody. But I also could see him still just being around like a 75 to 80 catch guy. And he's fun and nice, but maybe not necessarily the number one pass catching option that you want him to be. I do think Kincaid will have a strong year, and I think he has the best chance out of everybody to move the needle. My biggest hope for this offense is I hope it's Josh Allen and the Bills run game. That's all I hope it is. Make it life easy on him, hand the ball off, churn out yards with ease, and then generate explosives with play action and allow him to use his legs and just attack defenses from there. Like use this power spread type of offense. I'm not saying run the ball 60% of the time, but I think work that run game in consistently, take advantage of your ability to win with gap and zone schemes on the ground with the running backs and with Allen by design. And then again, work in RPOs or alerts and all that kind of stuff, or coverage reads and pieces of that, but generate explosives with play action. I think that's my hope because to your point, from an offensive perspective, I really felt like the only A or like S tier type dudes that the Bills had for the past several years were Allen and Diggs. You could make a case if you wanted to for Deion Dawkins. I don't put him in that category, although I do think he's a good player. It's really just been Allen and Diggs and then the supporting cast. And now Diggs is gone. So it's really just Allen and that supporting cast. But I do think the run game can go a long way in terms of alleviating some of the concerns and everything kind of being placed on him. Oh, if all of our wide receivers have a great camp, it'll mostly be up to who? Josh or Brady? This is actually a good question. Oh, I would imagine Josh would have significant say and input. I don't think he has the creative control to say, I want this guy. And then they're going to be like, okay, cool. So I do think it would obviously be a collaborative effort, but I think it'll be mostly up to Brady. Charles says June 1st comes and the Bills sign. Dang. A corner. Or an edge. Corner. I would have said edge before Dewan Smoot. I'm going to say corner. Yeah, I'm going to say that. Or another 12 wide receivers. Adam says Ray Davis is going to be the dude. Oh, Gabby says, do you think the Buffalo Bills will make the playoffs? Yes. I don't think it's going to be, I was thinking of the next thing I was thinking in my head. Yes, I do. I just don't think it's going to be pretty at all times. Or it may be winning in a fashion that is not the sexiest to people. But I do think the Bills will make the playoffs. But it's going to be tough. Oh, man, Charles says, I want Justin Simmons. That gives us a dude at all three levels on D. I would love Justin Simmons. Even with them signing Edwards and drafting Cole Bishop, I would take Justin Simmons. I still want Quandre Diggs, who I still believe is a free agent also. Oh, man, especially for what they were going to cost. I wanted Diggs over Simmons because I thought Simmons would cost more, plus Diggs is a year younger. But yeah, I would take Justin Simmons or Quandre Diggs right now. Oh, 13 says Cook, Davis, Johnson, and then RB4, Gore or Evans. Oh, baby Gore versus Darrington Evans. I actually have to watch baby Gore more for me to kind of go into that. What does my initial thought is? Yeah, he runs a 4.58. Oh, so he's kind of like his dad. My initial thought with that is Darrington Evans, because he just offers such a burner dynamic and a different skill set piece than everybody else. Man, I'll say baby Gore. Why not? Nostalgic. What else? Walter S says, kind of unrelated, but do you envision the Bills working why is that going out of focus? Working Allen's contract by this time next year? The Jared Goff contract pushes Allen at the bottom of the top 10 highest paid. Yeah, it's funny how all these dudes keep getting paid, and Allen's contract just keeps going down and down and down. I think you're going to see a bunch of, not gymnastics, but reworking of Allen's contract whenever they can from a cap perspective and just from a paid perspective. I actually have to go back. Let me see what Allen, because I thought they did something in terms of where he's reworked. Man, his dead cap, that can't be right. Actually, no, it is right. His dead cap for 2024 is $113 million. Eesh. Yeah, I could see them maybe not next year, but I could see them reworking maybe once he gets to 2026. And 2 years, well, technically 3 years if you're including 2026 left on that deal, and where he'll be paid by then. Next year's a possibility, but I think 2026 is more likely, just based out of what we're looking at. And I think you're also too, I mean, it's nice that because they're still, even though he's at the bottom of the top 10 highest paid, he's still paid significantly. It's just that we're going to keep running into that with quarterbacks, left tackles. The extension Deion Dawkins signed this offseason is going to get pushed down the same way when Trey White was like the highest paid corner for like a minute, and then like Marlon Humphrey's deal came in, and I think Ramsey's deal came in and pushed him down. So we'll see. Oh, this is a sneaky good question from Mazda Hawk. Do you think Milano starts at linebacker week 1? If so, do you think he's at 100%? I'm sneakily worried about Matt Milano being healthy just because they've signed so many linebackers. It makes me think, and drafted one as well, it makes me worry that he's not going to be ready. Just seeing there and knowing, again, you have Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Ulofoshio, who they drafted, Nicholas Morrow, Deion Jones, and then Joe Andreessen, the free or UDFA they just signed from UB. So again, you need bodies for camp. You need dudes in the preseason. And it's not crazy to have like 8 linebackers. But the fact that they have Morrow and Jones, like, it makes me think something's going on in terms of this. Richard said, I'm worried. I asked this question earlier. Oh, I'm sorry, Richard. My apologies. I missed this question for you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I am worried. Just signing all these linebackers makes me, I guess smaller conspiracy theory could be like they don't have confidence in Dorian Williams, or he hasn't hit the trajectory or levels that they wanted him to, which is fine. I think he had to take some time anyway. So like that's like a smaller worry for me or conspiracy piece. But the bigger one is, yeah, that they're not confident in Milano being ready and they're trying to hedge their bets. So that does worry me. And again, he did have a significant break. Like he legitimately broke his leg in a gruesome fashion. Um, oh, I do think he starts at linebacker week 1. If he does start, it's because he's 100%. They're not going to risk him. Like they're not playing. If he's not going to be 100% until week 4 or 5, they're not playing him until week 4 or 5. I do think he starts at linebacker week 1, but I'm not holistically confident, and I am worried. I am worried. Was it only a broken leg with Milano, or was there knee damage as well? I can't remember if that was confirmed or not. I was in this exact same boat last week on this show, and I looked it up. It was just a break. So no ligament damage, no meniscus damage, no structural anything other than just breaking his leg. So his knee was intact, but the leg break was severe. And then that type of leg break that he had carries with it a pretty intensive rehab process, and then what that looks like going forward. So yeah, I worry a little. And Charles says they need 8 to 10 linebackers for Cam, not a concern yet. I agree, but the type of linebackers they're bringing in, it's not just like, hey, camp body, camp body, camp body. Granted, Deion Jones isn't what he used to be with Atlanta, and Nicholas Morrow isn't like this huge difference maker, but you've got 2 vets who have significant experience, and especially Morrow, who started a majority of games last year for the Eagles and saw significant snaps in each one. Granted, their linebacker play wasn't great, but yeah, I am a little worried. And again, to your point, that's why I mentioned it, right? You do need camp bodies, but I do worry a little bit. I do worry just because it's not just the names that they bring in, or it's not just the quantity, it's the type of player, or names that they're bringing in, like the experience, that type of piece. It just scares me a little bit. Bum, ba, bum, ba, ba. What else? I saw that comment in here from Jim saying this was from the NBC Bills. Placed Milano leg on injured reserve. Milano suffered a fractured leg and torn ACL. So that's what I initially thought last week, and then I looked it up, and there was no structural knee damage. Let me look up. Oh, so yeah, and there's a recent article that just came out 4 days ago. Bum, 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 bum. Bleacher Report's Christopher Knox wrote an article breaking down some stuff for him and said the good news is that Milano's injury didn't involve any ligament damage. Given the timing of the injury, it would be surprising if the 29-year-old isn't on the field for week 1 of this upcoming season. I'm trying to find the 1-2 I found last week as well. But yeah, I had initially thought that he had torn his ACL or tore like an LCL. And I know like even there's like different pieces, like Yahoo Sports reported on October 8th that he suffered a fractured leg and had an ACL injury. But then I read last week and a couple of now, yeah, there's conflicting reports, but it looks confirmed from the majority of them that he did not have any ligament damage. But yeah, conflicting reports, not great. What else? Yeah, Richard's saying I'm really scared Milano isn't 100%. I feel you on that. I am worried about that. Oh, Aiden says, what percentage of Vaughn are we going to get this year? 75 to 80%. I think he's going to be an edge 3 or an edge 2. I don't think he's going to be the Von Miller that was still a very effective and terrorizing player for his first, 10 weeks of the year for the Bills in 2022. I think he's going to be significantly better than he was last year, but mainly because I just thought last year he was like an edge 5 and not very effective. I think he'll be an edge 3 or edge 2. I think that's like 75, 80%. Like, I just think that's what it is for him. RJ says Milano's injury is the most mysterious leg injury in modern NFL history, right? Because I have heard both that he partially tore the ACL and MCL and then also heard the contrary. Yeah, that's why it lost me last week. Like I said it definitive. I mean, you were here. I said it definitively, like, yeah, because he broke his leg and then also had knee ligament damage. And then people in the chat were like, no, there was no knee ligament damage. And then I looked it up and found multiple reports saying, nope, it's just a break, no knee ligament damage. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, yeah, even looking it up again now, it's, yeah, Schrodinger's knee injury. That's very good. I like that. Well done. Yeah, I initially thought he tore his ACL and either MCL or LCL. Like I thought there were 2 ligament tears and the broken leg. But then last week when I read it from multiple places, including the confirmation from the doctor or the confirmation post-surgery or something like that. It was a very good definitive source that there was no ligament damage. It was just a break. So I don't know. It's weird. And again, it was a gruesome. I also didn't look into it too much when it happened because it was gross. Like I don't like seeing breaks like that. And I just heard how bad it was. So I don't, I still don't. I'm going back and like rereading things now. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, the Buffalo News also confirmed. Oh, that's where it was. So this is straight from Matt Milano himself. So we can put this to rest. Milano. So reported from the Buffalo News, Ryan O'Halloran or Halloran. Milano revealed himself. So this is directly from Milano. Quote, Milano revealed he sustained a fractured right tibia, the bone that runs down the front of the leg, just below the knee, but there was no damage to any knee ligaments. Milano said he could not put on any weight on the leg for about 8 weeks, and he continues to rehabilitate at the Bills facility. He expects to have a normal offseason of training. This was, when was this article? I don't know when this article was. This article was from January 5th. So yeah, Milano himself confirmed that no anything. Yep. Oh, I think it's straight from Milano. Yeah, I would believe that's fair, but we'll see. What else? A lot of the mail. Let me go into my DMs here. I want to grab anything and everything left that I did not get to. It's funny too because I left like the stuff that was sent to me in the DMs and the threads for the end because I figured a lot of what was asked in that would be mirrored by what was asked here in the chat and the back and forth from from you folks. So it was funny that worked out like that. I'm just combing through my DMs to make sure I got everything from the mailbag before we keep moving on with the chat. I think we're good. Wide receiver. I bucketed everything and put in notes. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, it's funny. I comments and thoughts about, there was some stuff for Vampire and Granger in the mailbag in my DMs, wide receiver questions, some James Cook stuff, some Brady stuff, some Diggs stuff. One thing on Milano here. Yeah, good time. Good times. Ooh, question here from Buffalo Home. By edge 2 to 3 for Vaughn, what could his stats look like or prediction? Like, I mean edge 2 or 3 from the perspective of like snap share and rotational usage. I would expect to be at more in a pass rush capacity. I think he could push for, I don't want to give too big of a range. I'm going to say somewhere from 6 to 8.5 sacks. And I think he'll be top 2 in pressures amongst edge defenders from a volume standpoint, maybe not necessarily from an efficiency standpoint, but I'm going to say 6 to 8.5 sacks, top 2 in pressures, and then he'll have some run stops as well. So again, anything not like just you look at that and you're like, oh, okay, productive, but not what you're hoping from like a dude who is like a stalwart type dude. If he pushes close to double-digit sacks, I would be very happy, but also kind of surprised. KMax77 says, who's your biggest sleeper to make the 53? I mentioned it earlier a little bit. I think somebody asked me a training camp dark horse question, and I gave my answer then. It's the same answer here. In addition to our nickel worrying question, I'm going to go with Takori Couch, the corner UDFA from the University of Miami that the Bills brought in. He's just mean and nasty coming from the slot. He blitzes, he tackles, he hits, he reroutes in coverage and gets physical and jams and just does a bunch of stuff that you like. He's got familiarity with the guy who's on the staff now, who was his coach there at Miami. And just what the Bills need for that nickel spot. He can also play some special teams. So I think he adds some of that there. The only thing that I think really hurts him is obviously the presence of Cam Lewis. And then I think depending on what they do with Cole Bishop, like I don't know how they view Cole Bishop. Do they see him as just a starting safety on the back end or just a back end safety? Do they use him in any apex nickel dime backer type of stuff? But I'm going to say to Corey Couch just because again he's the biggest sleeper because I feel like people don't even know his name or that he's even signed as a UDFA coming out of the draft. Part of me wants to say Javon Solomon, but I think that's not necessarily as much of a sleeper because people are kind of not up on him, but are he's already like registered on the radar for people. Mazdaholic says, how do you feel about the new kickoffs? It will be interesting to see how teams start to play it and if anyone does anything out of the box and how it evolves. I love the new kickoff rule. I don't want anybody getting hurt, so I understand their move from the traditional kickoffs of yesteryear, but man, like Devin Hester is one of my favorite players of all time, and so is Dante Hall. I love kickoffs. Like I love the special teams nature of it and the game-changing nature of it and the big plays and hits that you would see on it. And I like this rule. Like this is what I wanted them to adopt from the first time I saw it in the XFL, or AFL, wherever it came from. So I'm down for it, and it will be interesting to see how teams start to play because I do think that the teams there are going to be special teams coaches that have strategies and schematic pieces that allow them to take advantage of it initially. And I think that'll pay dividends. And then it'll be interesting to see how sustainable that is or how much other teams copy it and or how much other teams try to implement it. Can they implement it? How does it change games? I think that's really a fun one that could potentially be worked in there. So, yeah, I do think it'll have an impact and it'll be fun to kind of see what teams do. Aiden says, man, this is another question for this. Aiden says, odds that Cedric Van Pran Granger actually will be our starting center. When might we know the answer by? This one came earlier as well, but I'll answer for you, Aiden, because I knew you weren't here earlier. I gave it a 45% chance just because it's tied into not just how he plays, but how McGovern plays and how Edwards plays. So it's possible that it could happen. I think we will know the answer by the end of training camp, end of preseason. You got to see how he looks against real competition. I think we'll get a good look once training camp starts. Like, what is the starting five? Because Osiris Torrance was with the ones right from the jump last year, rightly or wrongly. He was with the ones right away, and he never relinquished that spot. So we'll see. I don't think SVPG is going to be with the ones right out the gate, but if he's with the twos and he shows, and then Edwards slips up a little bit, and or McGovern slips up a little bit and they want to put him back to guard, or Edwards isn't cutting it, or SVPG is just playing so good. I think we'll know by the end of preseason. They're going to want to give him a full camp and want to give him a full preseason and give McGovern and Edwards a full camp and a full preseason to work things out together, and or just McGovern being able to fully work at center and see how that translates. So there's a lot of sample size you have to accrue in addition to getting SVPG ready just in and of himself. I'm going to throw up the banner here for One Pie Pizza because that is the sponsor of this show, and they legitimately make the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. And I don't say that because they sponsor the show. They sponsor the show because I think they're the best pizza in Buffalo. Go check out their menu. The online link can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you're listening to this show on. Sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. They're awesome. They're really good people. They do a bunch of drives and initiatives for Buffalo and the community as a whole in terms of giving back, like Toys for Tots and partnering with the SPCA, Alzheimer's Foundation, partnering with Roswell to try and knock out cancer. They do a lot of great things, and they also make a tremendous product. Everything that they make is delicious. So treat your taste buds and do some good for the community while you're at it, and go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Wanted to show some love for them and pull up different pieces. And I think, one more question here from Aiden. If McGovern is an 8 out of 10, but SVPG is a 6.5 out of 10, do you keep McGovern at guard? I'm trying to recreate last year's offensive line as much as I physically and possibly can. And I do think SVPG has a better anchor than Mitch Morse, or can anchor enough that it makes me confident in that spot. I do want to sustain the depth of the pocket, though, and not have any type of interior pressure affect Allen or potentially make him skittish. Man, Aiden says, like, what rating would you need SVPG to have at center? Or what would you need to have SVPG at center and McGovern at guard? I think 6.5 is close for VPG, but he's got to push like a 7 or a plus if you're like rating dudes like that. I would put him, he's got to be a 7 because we know what McGovern is. I think McGovern at guard is like a 7, 7.5, or it could push an 8, which is fine. So I would need that type of reflection to happen at center for VPG, or McGovern would have to be like a 5 or a 5.5 at center, and SVPG is a 6.5 or a 7 at center. And then I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's the better move. Let me take him back. So because we know what McGovern is, we know what McGovern is at left guard. If he struggles at center and SVPG is holding his own, then it's like, all right, cool. Let's try and recreate what we did last year. I also want to recreate what we did last year because I really, 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 really like David Edwards as the 6th offensive lineman, and that really works in those sets. And with this nature of trying to go in zig when defenses zag and run the ball more, create more power looks and play action and get creative and make the defense have to answer questions that they don't want to have to answer, I really want David Edwards to go back to that 6th offensive lineman. But I understand if he wins the job, but it's going to be a fun piece. Oh, you're welcome, Aiden. I appreciate the questions. This was a great time. I'm going to throw the banner. This is Toodles, folks, as we wind down here. If you have not already, please, 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 thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Please, 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 and thank you. Apparently, some people didn't like this episode. We got 2 dislikes / thumbs down / down votes, which is disappointing, but them's the breaks sometimes. So please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It's greatly appreciated. If you are listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage. Turn on notifications for Disguise Coverage, that playlist here on YouTube. Subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole. Word of mouth is also tremendously appreciated. If you enjoyed this show, if you enjoy the show regularly, the brand, whatever have you, please tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome the show is. If you hated this show or you hate me, that's fine. Tell your enemies about the show or about me and try and ruin their day or night by making them watch this show. If you had anything that I did not get to, I apologize. Follow me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2 ANT. Please send DMs my way, tweet at me, whatever you got. If there was something that I did not get to, which is possible because the chat was hopping and I was also trying to pull stuff from the mailbag and make sure I didn't miss any of the mailbag DM stuff and make sure I overlapped with everything in the chat. So if I missed something from you in the show, I apologize. Get at me on Twitter and I will answer you there. I'm very active. DM me or tweet at me, whatever you want to do. And I apologize if I missed something from you. Thank you very much for the kind words that are coming through in the chat. I appreciate you folks. And thank you very much for everybody joining me live here in this episode. The back and forth. Oh, Jim says, what jersey do you have on? I have a Jason Williams Sacramento Kings jersey on, Mr. White Chocolate. I appreciate the kind words coming in from you folks. And thank you to everybody who submitted me questions on Twitter and the threads. Thank you very much to everybody who submitted me stuff in the DMs. And made it, the DMs were really nice too, because I was able to just kind of put everything succinctly together and kind of bucket everything. And thank you again to everybody who rode with me live here in this episode, especially when I do these solo episodes. It's always nice to see the live viewers and the engagement and the chat going back and forth. It's almost like I'm not doing a show solo. And I know this is kind of like the dead time of year before camp really starts to rev up and preseason and everything. So I appreciate all you folks for stopping by, the questions for me, the questions and back and forth with one another. This is a really fun episode. It's always a great time in here. Like you folks who tune in regularly and even the ones who tune in semi-regularly. I really appreciate the live chat presence. And it's something that I think has been really strongly cultivated here on the show. So I appreciate all you folks who tune in live. If you didn't tune in live, that's cool. I appreciate your post live view, listen, download, whatever have you. Thank you very much. I've seen some more positive comments come in. I appreciate that, Richard. That's really awesome. For those who don't know, I don't pull up positive comments about myself as the show closes because I think it's corny, but they mean a lot to me and they warm my heart. And so I thank you folks very much for that. Again, if I didn't get to any of your questions, tweet at me at pro__ant. Pro 2 ANT. Myself and Eric will be in the Cover One Film Room live tomorrow night, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, May 15th, doing a film breakdown on Mr. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, what he offers, who he is, what we can expect to see in this Bills offense. And then if time permits, I said it last week, I didn't get to it. just with how the back end of my week went, and then Mother's Day weekend and everything that I had to do for that. If time permits, I am trying to do a special one-off Javon Solomon film breakdown that'll come out end of this week-ish. If that's something that you would be interested in, feel free to throw that up in the chat and or tweet at me and tell me that's an awesome idea. He's got some fun tape and also some things that are somewhat worrisome, and I kind of want to put him under the spotlight considering how much of an outlier he is, but also a fun player as well. So if I have the time, I'm planning on getting into that, so we'll see what happens. Joe DeRosa wants me to do a Javon Solomon video, so that means I won't do one. Just kidding. Yeah, so cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate you, folks. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another live episode of Disguise Coverage, or I'll see you in the film room tomorrow night, Wednesday, May 15th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, whenever I see you, Godspeed, and as always, go Bills.